Well, ladies and gentlemen, in a quiz program, if the quiz master asks, what is the synonym for an innovator? Well, the answer is definitely Mr. Sonam Wangchuk. He has carved a niche for himself in terms of reforming the education sector of India. We are going to hear from this great man, Mr. Sonam Wangchuk, who is also an engineer and, of course, an entrepreneur, and more importantly, an education reformist. Mr. Sonam Wangchuk, it's all yours. We are eagerly awaiting to your words.
Hello, members of TI and delegates of TiECON 2021. Please accept my greetings from the mountains of Ladakh, a wintry Ladakh rather. The outside temperature these days in the nights have been -15, with wind chill effect -20. But I bring you greetings from a very warm, passive, solar heated room, which right now is around 22 degrees centigrades, even in the wintry cold. And that's what applying high school science to innovate and solve problems does, even for the harshest part of the planet. So anyway, I'll come to that later, but it's a great joy to be connecting to so many entrepreneurs and enthusiasts. I'm happy to share a little bit of my journey in remote Ladakh, trying to solve problems of the region and, if possible, of the planet as well. And I'm looking forward to interact with you all who are also doing similar things in your own different parts of the world. So I'll take you through my journey in Ladakh with some images, because as we say, images speak much more than 1,000 words, and that's more true than anywhere else when you're talking about a place like Ladakh, which is so different from any other parts of the world. So just that from childhood, I have seen the difficulties of a place like this, and yet the possibilities also. And that's what has been driving me to find match challenges with solutions. And I'll share these stories with some images, as I said, as we go along. So let me please share my screen for some images. Let's see if this works. Okay. Let me know if you can see my screen. Here we go. I hope you can see this map. So this is Ladakh, top north of India, in the, or rather across the Himalayas. It's a trans-Himalayan region, which means it's beyond the Himalayas on the Tibetan plateau, which means Himalayas, which are green and lush and wet, are very different from where we are. It's in the rain shadow of the Himalayas, and therefore just across the Himalayas, it's rather desert, high altitude, cold desert, more like a moonscape or Marscape than Earth or landscape. That's what it does, geography does when you are across the barrier. It's a desert. Let me show you how, where temperatures are, ranging from +35 to -35, and rainfall, snowfall, precipitation is less than 4 inches in a year. It's like nature has left us high and dry. Anybody who flies into Ladakh would think life wouldn't be possible here, except that if you look carefully, you will see these green oases, which are nothing but human contribution to nature. Our ancestors mastered the art of cultivating even in these harsh climates, using nothing but water from thousands of years ago, fossilized water, which is what glaciers are. So they mastered channelizing glacial melt waters through the rocks and leading them to dry patches of desert, and then started growing wheat, barley, peas, vegetables like spinach, cauliflowers, cabbages, fruits like apricots, apples, pears. And this is one place where human beings have enriched nature, afforested rather than deforested, and there's nothing to deforest anyway. So this is Ladakh, as I said, a moonscape or a Marsscape, but this is just to tease you. A picture here is actually of the Mars. Just to show you how close it is, this is Ladakh. And let me take you further. Despite all these harshness of nature, people have not only survived over millennia, but a colorful civilization has thrived with its own language, literature, music, dance, and a lifestyle in harmony with nature. They've been very innovative, our ancestors, and that's what inspired me as a growing child. To make harsh winters tamed, they didn't have all the central heating and gadgets of today, but what they would do is in their calendar keep all the festivals, the colorful monastery festivals, village festivals, all in winters and none in summers, so that summers are spent in the greenery and farming and fun, but winters have all these colorful treasures stocked away. And come winter, people start looking forward to festivals in villages, and people actually count away their winters from festival to festival to festival, and then it's spring and another colorful season. So that's how they have been innovative, and innovation doesn't always take whirring gears and smoke belching from machines. It can be as great as a social innovation that makes winters in Ladakh something to look forward to. And that has inspired me since childhood. Now, going forward, unfortunately, being a tiny minority in the mountains, in a vast tropical country like India, poses many challenges. And one of those challenges, the biggest one, I think, is faced by children. They fail in their hundreds, if not thousands. And this is what I came face to face with when I was doing my own mechanical engineering. I had to teach students to support my own engineering education. And that's when I understood what they were going through. Schools with 0% results. 95% of the students would fail repeatedly every year. And yet the system would blame the students or the parents for being backward, primitive, almost retarded. And that was not a healthy situation, I thought. Now, while teaching these students to finance my engineering, I felt moved and thought, what would one engineer do, joining the long queues of unemployed engineers? Rather, I should go back to Ladakh and change the system of education. So when my friends were queuing up to go to Silicon Valley, Bangalore, and places, I decided to go back to Ladakh and start with changing the education system. Engineering was my first love, but this was a louder cry. So I decided I would rather work on this and then later apply my engineering to make life easier in a place like Ladakh. So back in Ladakh, I started working with other like-minded people, and we collaborated with the so-called failures, the thousands of teenagers who were, declared failures and rejected by the system. We made them into an asset, and we call them the ants army. These helpless, hopeless young people who have been rejected suddenly became the change makers. They were trained to go out into villages and change the mindsets of people to give priority to education over kerosene and rice and, roads. And very soon we saw a very interesting thing. When people's priorities changed, politicians' priorities changed, because politicians thrive on fulfilling people's wishes. And when people don't know what to wish, they ask for kerosene and rice, and happily they fulfill them. But when people start asking for education and high quality education, they have to run from pillar to post to provide that, or else they would lose elections. So people's priorities changing meant politicians' priorities changing, and that meant bureaucrats' priorities changing, and that meant schools getting all the attention that they deserve. So in a way, these hopeless, rejected failures changed the whole system by changing people's mindset, which they could best do, by doing street theaters, skits, music, photo exhibitions, and so on. And that changed the whole system. And at the same time, we also said, let's change the textbooks, because the reason for failures, major reason, was that up in the mountains of Ladakh, children were being taught what would be taught in Delhi or Punjab. A for apple, B for ball, fine. But when it comes to F, they would say F for fan. Now imagine the example, fan in a -20 winter. When children are shivering, they ask, what is this gadget? And when the teacher says, this keeps you cool, their eyes pop out. Why would anybody in the world want to be cooler than we are? So that's what is the gist of things wrong in the system. When you apply, blindly something from somewhere else, it completely doesn't work. So we said we cannot just accept those textbooks which children can't relate to. So we changed the textbooks and published new textbooks for Ladakh that they could relate to. Similarly, teachers, we had to train them rather than blame them. So we trained them in child-friendly, hands-on teaching techniques. And definitely, when we do whatever it takes, rather than be bogged down by all the challenges. We don't have money, we don't have expertise, we don't have textbooks, we don't have trained teachers. No, when you do whatever it takes, then things start changing, and they did. As you can see, the results were 5% consistently, always. Very soon they started changing, and in some years it came up to 75%, thus proving that it was not the children who were failing, it was the system. It was not, they were primitive, they were backward, or some would say there is not enough oxygen in your air, you will never learn maths and science. Teachers from outside would say, well, this proved that it was not oxygen in the air that was to blame. So still 25% were failing, and for them we said we should do something different. If they don't learn the way we teach, then let's teach them the way they learn. So we didn't give up on the 25% who still failed. For them, actually, we did much more. We actually started a whole new different kind of school for them. With a batch of some 15 or 20 so-called failures, I and my colleagues went to a desert patch in the middle of nowhere by the Indus River, and we said we'll set up a school. We came here in parachute tents and camped here and built the school that would be very different. And in the next 5 or so years, this school was created on the same desert. This is a very different school. To begin with, this is a school where the admission criteria is not your marks or distinctions, but rather that you have failed in the conventional system. And if you have failed, you get priority over those who have passed or done too well for a change. Now, the school is also very different for grown-ups who could learn how to live in harmony with nature, because it was built with natural materials like mud or soil, powered by natural energy sources like the sun, free and abundant over our head, mud, which is free and abundant under our feet. So the two combine with some human ingenuity and create a school that is zero energy, off grid, even when these terms were not invented or coined back then. Now, the school was designed and built by the students because that's how we wanted them to learn. If they can't sit in a classroom and listen to lectures and read texts, then let them apply what is in the text on ground. And that's what we did. Once the school was built, the running of the school is also done by the students. This is where their social sciences come alive, civics, governance, and they run the school like a little country with a little government that lasts for 2 months, with a little parliament where they present, report, and be accountable. Life skills that you couldn't learn from textbooks. So you can see in the little parliament, when they get elected, they make the plans for their next tenure and they execute it during the 2 months and then present it in the parliament again, thereby learning the life skills of accountability and so on. The children get their portfolios or responsibilities, like some would take care of the cows, some would take care of the solar cooking and heating gadgets, others would take care of the organic farming, the power plants, the greenhouses, and yet they would relate it to their textbooks. For example, the one taking care of cows would use statistics and all its bar charts, histograms, pie charts to track the milk production of the cows over different seasons. Similarly, more complex subjects like germ theory or microorganisms would be applied to preserve fruits for longer duration. Apricots, which have a shelf life of 1 week, when you sterilize it and pack it as jam, gets a shelf life of 2 years. And they would see that these chapters are not just for bothering them in examinations, but rather can be handy in real life. And what also happens is that some of these students meet their careers during this process. So some who like the jam making become suppliers of pulp and confiture for the nation, different industries. Others who take care of visitors to the school have started globally famous companies, travel companies, yet others go back to their villages to add value to their products. So they meet their meaningful careers during the learning itself. And at the campus, they apply all the sciences in their school to create a place that is warm in winter. Ladakh is almost polar in its weather in winters, but then the buildings that they build, let me tell you, stay at plus 18 through the winter, when outside would be minus 20 degrees centigrade. So this magic is possible when you innovate using what is in your textbook, simple high school textbooks. You don't need a PhD to solve these problems. Most problems in the world could be solved with high school math, science, geography, and so on, I think. And these buildings are interestingly designed in such a way that they stay cool in summer also, while being warm in winter. Now, this is how it works. Let me tell you how it works. That's how, when the sun shines, the building has a greenhouse, and the greenhouse, transparent as it is, heats the air inside, and the air inside rises and goes into the building. This is convection from your high school chapter on heat. So convection is not just for exams. It makes your building warm, and the air goes into the building, gives its heat to the walls, becomes cool itself and therefore dense, and is pushed into the greenhouse, and the cycle continues all day without any power, pollution, bills, just natural convection. That's what convection is. Similarly, conduction brings the heat of the sun from the afternoon into the room by midnight when it is really cold, particle by particle, conduction. And then at night, when you close all windows, the walls start radiating, and there comes radiation into play. So the chapter on heat goes to make your life different in a harsh winter. So you can innovate using what is available abundantly in your school itself. Similarly, at this school, we do most of the things using solar power, from cooking to greenhouses, producing green veggies in the snowy winters, to lighting, to electricity, to water heating, pumping, and even the cows at this campus live in solar heated cow sheds. Again, an interesting concept. I'll not have time for that this time. But again, these techniques the students learn, and some of them take it forward as a livelihood. So we have launched many startups who now go and design and build solar passive buildings for the government, for the citizens, for the Indian Army, and so on. Finally, some stars that people in Ladakh or young people follow, and let's see what do they have in them. This is Rigzin. He became a journalist, and finally he became the education minister of the Hill Council at 27. And this is Tanzin. He has become a famous filmmaker, globally winning many awards on different continents, documentary films. And this is Tinless, who's known globally for her innovative travel company, which is all women's before they started becoming popular, where the porters, the guides, the clients, and even the owner are all women. Can you guess what's common in them? What could be common in all of these famous personalities in local Ladakhi life? Well, not that they have been the most privileged children going to the best known schools. The common thing among them is that they have failed, and repeatedly so, in their exams, the 10th grade exams, until they came to this school that I talked about, and everything changed. So even those who we call failures can do wonders when the right environment comes. So you can imagine what others can do. But for that, we have to do whatever it takes. And that's what my story is about. Do whatever it takes. And even in the harshest places, with the most challenging circumstances, you can thrive. Now I'll welcome you all for questions, and I'm told there'll be questions sent in texts, and let me check and answer. So welcome. Any questions? Okay, let me see. Okay, now I'm starting to get questions here. Tell us something about your childhood. What was the driving factor toward you getting involved in education sector? Well, from childhood, my childhood was very unusual in that I grew up in a tiny village in remote Ladakh of 5 households, and therefore no schools. But I always say I have no regrets that there were no schools. I came to learn later that actually no schools is better than bad schools, and most schools, unfortunately, are bad schools. So I was lucky that I could learn from nature, from people, human beings, in natural conditions. When my friends, I would tease them now, were learning from faded pages of textbooks that roots go down, shoots come up, I was on the field sowing a seed in the ground and actually seeing the roots go down, shoots come up, and leaves unfurl without having to memorize LEAF leaf and LEAVES leaves. all these mumbo jumbo of English alien language I didn't have to go through. Got to learn in my mother tongue from my mother. What could be better than that? When you have grip of your mother tongue, it's very easy to learn other languages. It doesn't take long, 16 years to learn a language like English. I knew only Ladakhi, and because of that, later, it was not difficult for me to learn some 9 languages once you have grip of your own language. So that's how I started reflecting, what was it in my childhood that helped me learn without schools. Till 9 years of age, I didn't go to any schools. At 9, I went and faced some horrible experiences in the school, and maybe it really disturbed my true learning. So this made me feel that education needs to be relooked at. And later, when I was doing my engineering, I got to teach students, and again I learned what was going on in the education system. So these two stages in my life, childhood and my teenagers, pushed me into the education sector, although my love was for mechanisms and problem solving and so on. So I could do some social problem solving also. Why is a different education system needed? What's lacking in the age-old system that we have all gone through? Yeah, that's what my story is. What is lacking, I'm sure you must all be also getting. I don't think this system that we say now, the conventional system, it's not the age-old system of learning. It's actually only 300 years old. After industrial revolution, they started making factories of everything, industrializing everything. They did the same to schools. So these became factories with, cells and mass production and mass education and memorization and examination and degrees, paper exams, paper knowledge. That's what happened during the 300 years. Actually, age-old system of learning was much different and much better. It was always hands-on, always. Actually, human beings are wired for experiential learning, not for texts and lectures. As hunter-gatherers, we were never memorizing how to catch a deer. We were out there in the wild, in the face of all kinds of challenges and dangers, even along with grown-ups, imitating them and learning from them and doing it. So we were always doers as learners. And as settled farmers some 10,000 years ago, we were again on the farm, on the field. Our children were learning on the go, never sitting pin drop silence in a classroom. It's very new. And that's what needs to change. We have to bring back the action again in the system. And that's when lessons will become unforgettable. And we won't have to scold the children for forgetting their lessons. So that's what needs to change. Ice stupas of Ladakh is a great innovation to solve a social problem. Tell us more about this interesting project. So ice stupas are a small effort in the mountains of Ladakh to dare and solve the crisis we are facing because of our glaciers melting fast in the face of climate change. So I grew up as a child hearing stories about how our ancestors also used to try creating glaciers themselves. It's not a new thing that I invented. It has been around for long. And in the last 30 years or so, another senior person from Ladakh was also trying similar things. So let me just show you some images to talk about how this works. So this is the Ice Stupa artificial glacier that we attempted at our school some 4 or 5 years ago. But before that, let's understand how the terrain in Ladakh is. This is Ladakhi typical village, a stream coming up from the glaciers going down to the Indus River. And the stream is a trickle in winter and spring. Spring is serious because that's when farmers need water the most, and yet it is a trickle because it's cold still at the glaciers, and there's less and less glacier to melt nowadays with glacial global warming. So in spring, it's a trickle, but by June, July, suddenly it's very warm up at the glaciers, and there's actually a torrent, sometimes floods, too much water. So the bottleneck is only April, May, the spring months. And to solve this spring months bottleneck, we said the water that flows and goes in waste into the Indus in winter, we could freeze and store. Frozen water can be stored for long times till it melts. So normally you would have ice on the ground, but that would go away by March. It wouldn't last till May or June. So how to make the ice, the frozen water, last into May was our challenge. And we again came to high school or middle school geometry to help. We wanted to keep the ice long into the summer rather than have it melted by March. And we understood that it's the sun that melts the ice, and sun needs surface area, and we need to cut that surface area. And how do you do that? Well, if you paid attention to your geometry lessons, they say that certain shapes like spheres, hemispheres, or even cones have low surface area for the given volume. So the sun wouldn't get enough surface area to melt it, and yet the farmers would get enough volume. And that's what we did. Here I'll show you. Another basic science principle from primary school, I think, is that water always maintains its level. So if you put a pipe upstream and bring it downstream, then the water inside the pipe will want to go to the same level as it came from, and therefore there will be pressure in the pipe, and this pressure would make a fountain gush into the air like this, into the -20 air, where it loses its heat. The liquid loses its heat. The heat is called latent heat, by the way, if you remember your science. And when a liquid loses its latent heat, it becomes solid. And that's what we did as frozen ice. And it takes naturally the shape of a cone, and that geometry helps it survive longer into the summer. This pilot ice stupa was 6 stories tall and covered 1 million liters of water. And that could be used when it melted later in summer for planting trees, for example. Challenges are always there, and you have to do whatever it takes. So we had many broken pipes, frozen fountains, late nights on the ice. This is a part of the game. If you want, gains, you have to take the pains. But then finally you get subsequent years, large ice stupas. This one, 3 million liters, 30 lakh liters. And this shows how it melts in spring, and the melted water we collect in a tank and then drip irrigate the trees. Every drop is precious. So this, you can see the image of the last leg of ice stupa when it is nearly melted, and that's how it releases its water. And 5,000 trees were grown in a desert that had never seen any greenery. And that's possible thanks to some middle school principles of science and maths, geometry. This got us the Rolex award, but there is a big but, and that big but is always something that I want to address and share with people. The big but is that we are not proud of these ice stupas. They cannot solve our challenges. Our challenges are from global warming, and global warming is not something we create here in Ladakh. It happens in the big cities like Bangalore, New Delhi, New York, and therefore we have to change behaviors in these cities. And that's where you can help more than we in the mountains. And to solve this problem at the global level, last year we dared to launch a global movement to behavior change in the world. And that's called I Live Simply movement, which is like a crowdfunding game for young people, where they can contribute not money, because planet doesn't need money, but pledges to change behavior, lifestyles. So you can contribute thousands of dollars equivalent of green effect and impact by pledging, for example, to walk and bicycle instead of cars, to take trains instead of aeroplanes, or to go vegetarian or plant trees. You can do these pledges or New Year resolutions on ilivesimply.org, and I invite you to join this movement. This you can always participate. Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to share.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you'll have several questions to ask Sonam Wangchuk. On behalf of all of you, it's my pleasure to ask a few questions to him. Why is a different education system needed? Why not? Most of us agree with the age-old education system. And why do you think that there needs to be a change?
Just that our children need a lot of action. Otherwise, they'll be bored, and when they get bored, they do all kinds of things and become destructive, and that's why they become infamous as teenager rage and rebellion. Well, actually, it's the pent-up energy that nature has packed us for hands-on learning. When you don't let that, and when you prison them in a room, the energy comes out in violent forms sometimes. And therefore, I really think children should get application. So what I think is that now, with pandemic and online culture, we should have lectures and theories online, and schools should become the action bhumi, the karm bhumi for application. The schools should not do the same lectures that are 10 times better on YouTube with all kinds of animations and illustrations. Our teachers can't do that good now, and they don't need to. Let it be outsourced to internet, and let our schools specialize in something internet can never do, and that's application. That's why students should come to school and work in teams and collaborate and apply their knowledge to create solutions. And that way, the entire student population will become problem solvers rather than problems themselves.
Well, sir, you have become a household name not just in our country but in different parts of the world. Several awards you have won, accolades have come your way. How are you handling all this?
I mean, awards, they're a byproduct. You should not and never work for them. And I never cared for awards. I did what I had to and whatever it took. And if people along the way recognize, that's good, but that should not influence your work. If it makes your work a little easier, it's good. That's the only thing I can see as a benefit. Otherwise, it has a risk, a slippery slope. It can be these fame and awards, and doers are never bothered about these things. These are a byproduct, as I said. So I think that's about it, and I want to wish all TIE members and delegates a great new year. May all your efforts bear fruits. Do whatever it takes, and let's never give up. हम हार नहीं मानेंगे. All the very best. Thank you very much. Thank you.